Hi, this is Noel Rice from Falafel Software. I wanted to show how you can use REPL, Read, Evaluate, Print Loop utility. It's kind of a console app inside of Xamarin UI Test to build tests. So we've got this test here with the app start that they normally build right in. Call REPL. It's a method right off the app. Doesn't take any arguments. That's all she wrote. So all I need to do there is build this and run it. It'll load the application and it'll bring up REPL. So running that, we're going to run this in the Visual Studio Android emulator. Okay, so there's the app that we're working with, which is called TipCalc. It's one of the demo apps on the Xamarin site. And here's REPL, Reevaluate Print Loop. It's really simple in terms of the commands it has. If you just type in help, that's it. There's just those 4 commands. Most of it is using the tree and using a app variable that's automatically included for you. So the first thing we want to do is use the tree command, and here's all the pieces, all of the elements that are in this view. Starting with the root, going down into some of these forms text views, food and drink, total after tax, tip percent. Those are all forms text views. There is a slider render, so this tip amount can be altered here. And there are some form text views for things like the tip amount and for some of the labels here, as well as entry edit text. That goes here, here, and here. So now that we know that, the first thing that you want to do is type in app. That's the built-in instance that they give you of the app that you would have in your test. Hit dot, and then these are all the commands that you can run against elements that are on screen. So if we say flash, I can give this some information about what element I want to flash. In this case, there's a content, and that's the whole frame layout there. So let's use content and enter. And over here it flashes the entire thing. If the command is successful, it'll give you a result. So it's an array of results. So we're seeing the 0th and only result here, which is content. We'll get description, the rectangle, label, text, class, enabled. That's all the result we'll have at any time. So now that we've got that, typically we want to use a little bit more to define what the flash is going to do, or any of the other commands. So we'll try flash again, and instead of just putting in some value and hope it hits the right thing, we have a syntax here where we are looking for, we're setting up a query essentially. And so this e dot, now we can go and look for text. We could look for an ID, we could look for a class name, any of those things. In this case, we're going to look for some text, and we're going to try to find this label here, food and drink. So I could put in food, drink, and this is actually going to fail, sort of a fail on purpose here. Okay, so it doesn't find this because there's a colon at the end of it, so it's really particular. Let's put in colon, and now it'll flash food and drink and find it. So how can we do something that's a little bit more flexible? So there's another method that we can use off of here called property. And we can say I want to look for the property called text. And from here we've got a number of methods, like we can say if it starts with or ends with or it contains. Let's say if it contains food, for example, and we're still good. And this is much more flexible. So now that we've started to recognize things, we want to actually put in some data. So enter text is one method that we can use off of app. So app.enter text. And I'm going to look for this. Unfortunately, if you look at the tree, find the tree up here. Yeah, here we go. There's an entry edit text, but it doesn't have an ID. So it's just the class entry edit text. Let's say e.class entry edit text. And there's a second argument, which is going to be the text itself. So let's say I want to put in $50. Hit enter, finds the item, clicks it automatically for us at certain coordinates, and then puts in the 50. So that's okay, but now we go down to this next one. How does it know which entry edit text we're looking at? There's a whole list of them. They're all three of these, for instance, are all entry edit texts. So we can use the index and say that I want the second item, so item 1. And the text I want to enter is with tax, so this is going to be 5375, and enter. Okay, so we could partly do the same thing for tip percent. So if we put this up and we just change the index, we should be able to put in tip here. And if I hit enter, there's going to be an issue here because there's already text in this. It's actually going to look a little bit corrupted here. It adds it on to the end there. So we need one additional command here, which is the clear text. So go out to the same element. We don't need the second argument because we're clearing, we're not adding any information. So we've cleared it, and now we can go back to the earlier command with the enter text and get a clean entry. The tip percent can be set either by the slider or by the edit box here. So I'll go to app.set slider value class forms seek bar, and you can find that out by using the tree command again. And after experimenting with the slider a bit, it turns out for this instance of it that it goes up to 1,000. So the min and max of this may change. 200 is the 20%, or I could say 10% here using 100. Let's look at that. So it moved the slider, and then the edit reacted. Do that one more time. I want this to end up at 20%. One of the things you may end up wanting to do is to wait for elements to exist. So if there's some calculation going on and it takes a little longer to either navigate or calculate the information, you want to be able to wait for the item to respond. First of all, you can use a wait for element. This just makes sure that the element exists. For element. Forms text view. So these are text views here. This one's, if you look in the tree view, it's the fourth one down. This one's the sixth one down. Forms text view. So we'll say that it's an index of 4. So we can just make sure that that element exists before we continue on. So it runs, it brings us back the item, and we can see that it's got text of $10. And now we want to do the same thing for the total. All of the commands that we're making here get recorded on a clipboard that we can copy later. So we'll just run a copy command here and then paste the code right into Visual Studio, where we can trim it up a bit and use it to create our test. You may want to wait for a particular amount or a non-zero amount in case some calculation is taking a little bit of time. So there's an app.waitFor, and rather than taking a query for an element, it takes a predicate here. So I can say that we have app query, and I can put anything that returns a true or false. So in this case, I'm going to look for that same item here in the total, but I'm going to drill down and get its text. Back up for just a second, and I'm going to show you, first of all, tree. So we're wanting to get this forms text view, and I want to get the text out of it. So let's just do this separately for a moment. So we'll say, use a query. This is the sort of one-size-fits-all way of locating items. And we will say it's e.class is forms text view. Index is 6. Just make sure that's okay. So it's finding that. It's the 6375 that I'm looking for. When it brings back one of these, notice that it's got a 0 here. It's actually an array of app result. So we can actually index into it. And from there, we can get to any of these properties. I can say it's the first one, and I want to get its text. So there's 63.75. So that statement here I can use in a wait for. It looks like we've got an issue there. We should come back with some kind of a result. Let me just verify. So it returned immediately. That would be correct. Let's create a 0 amount just to verify that this is going to be okay. Put in 0. So the tip amount, total after tax, just 0 out all of these for right now. Okay, so we've got 0 there. Let's try the same command again. Much better. Okay, so I can put in, this may time out before I get a chance to put everything in here. About 53.75. It's already bailed because it has come from the non-zero. So that is good. So we've got to wait for, it waits to make sure that we've got a non-zero. And then later we can do a query to, we can do a assert and make sure that we've got the right kind of result here. We can check for a specific value, for instance, the 63.75. So all of that is good. I'm just going to run the copy command now. And now we can go back to the code. Let's create a new test. Fix this first. Paste all the code in. And there's going to be more than we want here, and that's okay. We're just going to chop out a few things, and some of these aren't appropriate without some additional fitting to the environment that they're in. Okay, the content and this, all of these are okay, but we don't really need them in the test. They're more for exploration and explanation of how the flash works. I'll just take those out. We're entering 50 on the first line, using the index to get 53.75 on the second line. And then on this last, we needed to put in a clear and then enter the text for the tip amount. So I'm going to take away some of the extra attempts. So here we're getting to the second or the third item, which is the tip amount or the tip percent. We're clearing the text, then we enter the text 20. We can also do that with the slider. I'll just leave the one with 200, which matches the 20%. We're going to wait for the two totals, the tip total and the total. Here we've kind of walked up inside of REPL to kind of snuck up on the text view for the total amount. And this we don't need to keep. It just was a way to make sure that we got the text there. So I'm going to kill these pieces. And then need to fix some of these. There's some items in here that will need slightly different syntax. Okay, so these three were failed attempts, and this last we fixed the closing parentheses here. So we're checking to make sure that we wait until there's a 0 value. And now I want to add in one line of code here that you can't do from REPL, an assertion. It's the REPL is just for finding items and manipulating them, but not for the actual assertion. So we can say assert dot are equal, and I want to make sure that this text is equal to the 63.75. And pop in the 63.75. It will need the $sign. So what that should do for us is once it becomes non-zero, the test moves on, then I'll check and make sure that it has the right value that we were hoping for. We can actually do that also with the tip amount, which should be 10 bucks, and that was the fourth item in. We'll talk about how to clean up some of this code at the end of this. Okay, so we can make our assertions here, and at the end, you might want to do a screenshot. The screenshot takes some text, and it'll show up. If you run it in the cloud, it'll show up as your step text. So I can say tip and total amounts. Test Explorer. We now have test totals. And I want to bring up the screen, so it's going to reload the app. The flashes aren't in there anymore, so it just checked to see that we had what we expected, rolls down, does the entry, and then verifies the last two pieces. Nice.